Bill Gates says we have an overpopulation problem. Elon Musk says we have an underpopulation problem. But what if they're both wrong and missing the bigger picture? Let's dive into it. So first off, let's look at the Bill Gates position of overpopulation. Obviously, Bill is kind of like a big face of this narrative. We also see lots of climate and environmentalist alarmists talking about this overpopulation problem, that we, as a growing population, are depleting the world's resources. We've seen specifically Bill Gates invest piles and piles of cash also into vaccines, which is, at least in my mind, a bit contradictory. If you want the world to be less populated, why would you make medicines that make people healthier? Unless they don't make people healthier. But anyways, by his seeming first principles hypothesis is that if you have more healthier people, you will somehow curb the growing population. This, again, I believe is just wrong from a first principles perspective, but let's hear him out.
In this year's annual letter, Melinda and I take the toughest questions we get asked and give our answers. One that's come up for a long time is, as we make the world healthier, is the population going to get so big that feeding everybody and maintaining the environment is going to be impossible? Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster. So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem?
I really hate that he just said keeping people alive and population problem all in the same breath. Keeping children alive is a net positive to the world. I don't care about your stupid population problem, but I'm not being very unbiased here. Let's keep going.
What we found out is that as health improves, families choose to have less children. And this effect is very, very dramatic. We find that in every country of the world, this is repeated. The population growth goes down as we improve health.
My initial reaction to this is that the only reason health kind of on that macro level improves over a short period of time is probably due to some level of socialization and these unnatural effects being pumped into a system. In Canada, for example, you could argue that we're all very healthy because we live a long time, but no one can afford anything, so people are just generally having less kids. I don't think that means that we're healthier. I think that as a whole, people on an individual level are less healthy in Canada because wait times for doctors are super long, because the food that we eat is complete garbage, and also people can't really afford to do the things that these people can afford to do, so they're all like sad and depressed. And so I think there's a missing link to that stat that he just gave, which is probably real, that correlation is not necessarily causation in this case.
So we've taken that chart that shows the global population growth, and we've actually extended it out all the way to 2100. And we can see that instead of continuing, it actually flattens out. Another way to see that is through this rate of population growth. And you can see that in the 60s, that reached a pretty high number, over 2% per year, and it's now come way, way down. Now, 11 billion people, still a lot, but the good news is that the faster we improve health, the faster family size goes down, and so we can feel great about saving those lives.
Oof, that's tough for me to watch, honestly. It's tough for me to think that we have a goal to have smaller families, to have less children, to have less opportunities for success in the future. Oh, that doesn't make me feel good. All right, let's see what the internet has to say. As health improves, families choose to have less children. Nah. The more inflation, financial punishment, birth control methods, and chemical cost infertility, the less families have children. You think I'd have kids if I could afford it? I'd be out here busting. This man talks like a real hero. But yeah, kind of the take that I had, I guess, earlier on. I maybe jumped the gun and hit the point. The big difference between a healthy population and a population kept alive on pharmaceutical drugs. Boom, hit it on the head. Absolutely. We do not have a good metric for health. Or health, we just immediately think to longevity. But it doesn't always mean the same thing. We don't always act and think with our best minds when we're 85 years old and kept alive on piles and piles of expensive medicines that also deplete our ability to truly live life. What is truly living life? Well, of course, it varies for different people. How can you take one single metric or one single stat or data point and then produce the entire population's ability to live on that single metric? He's so rich, he 3D prints PowerPoint presentations. Outstanding. That is that's pretty funny, and a nice grounding thought that we do have one of the richest men in the world telling us to have less kids and take more of his medicine. Seems like incentives are not quite aligned there. And we have Elon, another, rich billionaire that's going to tell us that we have a different problem. This other, if Bill Gates is an overpopulation doomer, on the other hand, we've got Elon, the underpopulation doomer.
If you just simply look at the birth rate statistics, you can tell what the future is going to be like because you can see how many children were born last year. And then you can say, like, is the birth rate trending down or up? And it's been trending down basically almost everywhere. So if you look at the birth rate last year, you know how many adults there will be in 20 years because that's how many babies were born. The trend is, like you don't have to be some master statistician or something like that.
This is a really good point that we can literally see how many 25-year-olds there will be in 3 years or in 22 years because you just count how many 3-year-olds there are. It is the longest and most accurate trend line probably from any stat that we can see. And actually, what he said off the start is that birth rates have been going down. Bill Gates also showed this in his chart here that we've got the birth rate declining to where are we today? Like somewhere under 1% population growth. That's pretty insane.
You can just look at kids born last year trending to well below replacement rate, and a lot of countries have been well below replacement rate for a long time.
Well, the concern is that if you have kids, then they'll contribute to climate change, and then they'll kill the Earth, right? That's the leftist concern, is that we're overpopulating the Earth and that we're going to kill it. Are you trying to overpopulate the Earth so that we can go to Mars and take over Mars?
The Earth is far from overpopulated.
Is this a deliberate strategy?
The Earth is far from overpopulated. Far from overpopulated.
Boom. So we've got really two opposing opinions about what really should be facts. But his claim here being that the Earth is far from overpopulated means, in Elon's mind, there's more resources on the planet Earth that we're going to have access to be able to sustain this massive population. In the comments we have, it never ceases to amaze me how short-sighted we are as humans. We view acute circumstances so narrowly just because population appears to decline relative to where it was prior to this moment, trending downwards, upward growth over millennia. We cannot definitively say, oh no, we're on the way to extinction because a generation people breeds less. Cycles people, all existence of ebbs and flows. I probably tend to agree with this take the most. I think that we are a cyclical species. I think that our climate, our Earth, our world is in a cyclical environment. And at the end of the day, it is going to ebb and flow. That said, we can probably look at data. There is manipulatable data that we can probably look at and determine where we're going to end up. But I'm not super sure that it matters over the long term because we don't necessarily need to affect or influence these trends. We want to react to these trends to provide value for the world that will be. In my opinion, there will always be a fruitful world that is here for us to enjoy. Also in there we have basically what they're saying is we need more people for the economy. Yeah, I mean, there is an interesting take here where if we've got too many, like it could be a quick cycle downward if the economy hit a certain breaking point, all these people, all these businesses, these businesses that aren't propped up by subsidy, these businesses that aren't propped up by being too big to fail, if they all disappeared and everyone's livelihood disappeared with them, there would naturally be less reproduction. There would naturally be less of a next generation. Ultimately speaking, people have more kids when they are optimistic for the future, and they have less kids when they are pessimistic about the future. While I understand the economics of population decline, I also think that any economic system which requires perpetual population growth is doomed to fail. I fundamentally disagree that anybody can look at me with a straight face and say that our world needs a certain population in order to survive or thrive. It's just wrong because our world has proven and shown to be relatively elastic. It's not some firm thing that needs, theoretically, like whether or not you believe the creation story or the evolution story, you just have to believe that the world survived with two people. That's kind that's kind of just where it all started, was whether, people came from a pile of cells that repopulated and reproduced over hundreds of millions and billions of years, or you believe there was some divine intervention and God put two people on the earth to procreate. You kind of just have to believe that it started with two. And so if we have a world that came from two, theoretically, the world can respond with, at least to our knowledge, anywhere between 2 and 8 billion. That's kind of like the sweet spot for the Earth as it is this far. I'm probably missing some nuance, and we can probably get into a pile of debates about that, which might be fun, and drop a comment down below, and I'll try to get back to you. Specifically as a result to an economic system, especially here in the Western world, I think that we've got this perpetual growth mindset, and we do have a need for perpetual growth within, especially Western culture. It stems from the fiat money. It stems from money being created out of thin air. The more you centralize and subsidize things for the quote unquote non-producers, the more that you remove merit, the more that you remove a meritocracy from society, you are required to hit perpetual growth because you have less or fewer people funding more people that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been here. Now, there's a debate whether that's good or wrong. I want to leave that to you in the comment section down below. But I do think that when you have a broken monetary system, you are required to hit this perpetual infinite growth in order to fund the fiat system. At the end of the day, the dollar that we currently use is based on debt. And when you have debt that grows and debt that compounds, you need to produce more in the future to pay back your growing debts. That is the first principles, basic logic of the situation that we have. And if you extrapolate this out, if you have significant profits and you know that those profits will be worth less in the future, you have to spend those profits. You have to grow those profits. So what do? You lend them out again as debt. We just did a whole episode on this on the MicroStrategies debt placement. It's right here if you want to watch it. And when you've got this system funded by debt and growth and more debt and more growth, you kind of hit a wall eventually. At a small scale, that probably works fine because the consequence of less growth is a smaller fall. But as you rise higher and higher and higher and higher into these debt levels where we see like the US government $35 trillion in debt, you need to maintain an insane level of growth in order just to maintain the interest payments, just to maintain the cost of that debt and the growing compounding cost of that debt. The problem here is that we have a monetary system that is artificially inflated. And you guys have heard me talk about this time and time again on this show and on this channel. That's classic Cobra effect. When you introduce unnatural forces into a supposed natural environment, you introduce problems that you could have never foreseen. And then once you're done arguing with that down below, I want to really get into the true effect. Can a sound money economy really blanket fix out this entire incentives problem? Because right now we have a short-term incentive population that is really controlled by a short-term political ecosystem and economy. And if we fix the money, if we had a monetary system that allowed for stable, long-term outlooks on society, would that give us the natural birth rate, whatever it may be? Do you run in the camp of, I think we should aim for and hit this target birth rate? Or are you in the camp of whatever the birth rate is, the world and society can, should, and will adapt to make it a fruitful and abundant world? So I guess overarchingly, can fixing the money change these concerns? Is over or underpopulation actually a problem? Or is it a natural consequence of the system that we live in? From my perspective, obviously, I think that when you fix the money, you fix the world. And when you fix the world, you get a nice natural ecosystem. Remember when you learned in like grade 2, I have a few kids that are currently in the early stages of school, and they're learning about ecosystems. They're learning about natural environments. And we're taught from a young age how a symbiotic ecosystem works. And you've got a perfect number of ducks and a perfect number of foxes. And then if you introduced more foxes into the ecosystem, all the ducks disappear and then all the foxes die in both those populations. And if you introduce too many ducks, then you've got too many foxes. And then it creates this imbalance in the world. But the ecosystem kind of has a way of balancing itself out. And I wonder if we are no different. Are we the same? Are we in the same category as the ducks and the foxes? And right now, we have this arbitrary kind of third party meddling and introducing new, unnatural ways to try to influence our society, to try to influence our generation, our population, our ecosystem, and our environment. I struggled to play this out for a long period of time and actually find the benefit. It probably does alleviate a small number of short-term pain, but I think overall, at best, passes the buck to a future generation, and at worst, causes us more pain towards the end of our lives. But what do you think? Is over and underpopulation a problem that we should try to be tracking and influencing and meddling with? Or do we laissez-faire and let the free market reign? How do you view your part as an individual? My name's Adam. Thanks so much for watching. If you like these, please make sure you subscribe and share and like and comment and tell the algorithm that you want to see more future-proof episodes. But most importantly, stay sovereign.